Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Weeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Welcome to Stitchery Stories. Today's episode is sponsored by me. I will be offering paid advertising opportunities in this slot and on the Stitchery Stories website, but in the meantime, are you frustrated trying to create your online course? Surely it's time to get some support so you can make progress and make money with your online course. With my online training course, you follow a plan that works and you learn exactly what to do and how to do it, so you can confidently build and launch your course much faster and easier, which results in more money for you sooner and a stronger business too. For more details on how I can support your course creation, marketing and launch, then please email me at hello@stitcherystories.com. And so now on to today's episode. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Ruth Norbury. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, Sue.
It's brilliant to speak to you today. And Ruth is somebody else who we've been trying to get this organised. It's all been my fault as well. So anyway, we're here. So I'm really pleased about that because Ruth's got some really great things to share with us. Here we are. We've got Ruth's bio. Ruth lives in Swansea, not far from the Gower Peninsula. She is almost entirely self-taught, so has learned what she does today from years of experimenting with embroidery. When not sewing, she loves walks to the beach and acting as an electric blanket for her feline army, who also like to closely supervise her work. Oh, I can see that, yes. The darker side of life fascinates her. Urban decay, the way the mind works or doesn't, and forensic pathology, all wrapped up in a cosy blanket of industrial metal music from bands such as Combi Christ, Rammstein and 9 Inch Nails. Ruth's pieces are made from almost entirely recycled materials. She believes they add more to a piece in terms of the stories the fabrics can tell, with almost a resonance from their history. Sun-bleached prayer flags from her canal boat, lace from antique linen, and even objects washed up on the beach are just some of the objects stitched into her work. Making things has been a huge part of her life since she first picked up a sewing needle when she was 5. And it all started with a cross-stitch snowflake. Oh, there we are. So that's been quite a journey then, Ruth, definitely.
Just a little bit.
And you did send me off on a real good rabbit hole as well, investigating those bands, I have to say. So that was all great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. So it was nice to hear some new and different things. Okie dokie. Right then, Ruth. So would you like to share with us what you're working on at the moment and what's got you excited as we head off into, God, it's February nearly already, isn't it?
I know. Where's it gone?
I don't know.
Currently, I'm ignoring the urban decay style, and I'm stitching a barn owl for a lovely lady in America.
Oh, right.
So it's back to the old style of work that I used to do, specialising in birds. But I've, in theory, got an exhibition in March.
Right, in theory.
With the title of Lockdown. So depending on whether that happens or not, then I'll be doing that too. Things that have got me excited. Ooh. I've been trying for quite a long time to work out a way of transferring photographs onto my embroidery.
Right.
But it's quite a textured background. So I don't want to put it through the printer as it might just eat it and it all go horribly wrong.
Right.
So
yeah.
I've discovered printing with acetone. So I'm quite excited about having a play with that in the near future.
Oh, here we go off down a rabbit hole. I'll come back to the printing acetone next. We'll be here all day otherwise. Right. Anyway, so that springs out a load of questions. Right. Where shall we start? Right. So you're busy on with a commission at the moment. That's on birds. And yes, when I was looking through your site and everything, you used to do birds. And now you don't really do birds anymore. You're on with your urban decay. So shall we go off on that rabbit hole of the difference in subject? Is that something to kind of get get chatting about now, do you think?
Of course, yeah. I sort of accidentally fell into doing birds through starting to learn how to design things. And I did like an Aztec design of a bird. And it ended up, his feathers worked really quite well. So I thought I'd try and see if I could copy a bird.
Right.
And then I did another couple of birds and another couple of birds and ended up becoming known as the birdie lady by the framer. And spent about 15 or 20 years stitching birds. So basically, it's not very me. I'm not saying I don't like birds. I love watching birds, but it's not something that particularly speaks to me.
Right.
So I decided to just go off on a tangent one day, and after a string of not very good projects, eventually found a kind of style that I just had a go at and just had a play to see what would happen. And then I thought, well, let's be brave and see if anybody else likes it. And they were actually more popular than my birds ever were. So I was quite surprised because I'd put off being me for so long. And when I decided to do things more, that I was actually interested in, it really took off. So I was very pleased.
Wow.
Quite surprised.
Yeah. Oh, do you know, I'm really glad I asked you that question now. Right. Oh, we can dig a bit more. That's really interesting that you started off doing birds because people liked your birds and people bought your birds.
Yeah.
And you did it for a long time. That's a long time to be doing birds. Meanwhile, the kind of real Ruth was bubbling along underneath.
Yeah, going slowly around the twist because I couldn't do them.
Yeah. And then, but the interesting thing was you were very, very brave. You said, right, I'm going to, because it's the hardest thing to stop doing what you have been doing that has sustained you economically for a long time. It's the hardest thing to stop and say, right, what am I going to say no to? It's a question that I spoke about a while ago. What are you going to say no to so that you can be more you? Go, bring you back into it. And as I've seen so many times, I've seen other people do this as well. There was somebody I knew was doing dog portraits. Exactly the same story. Got known for being dog portraits and then just kind of finally admitted to themselves that they didn't actually want to do dog portraits. What they wanted to do was cartoons or something along those lines. So yes, you allowed you to come out, and there we are. Found it more popular because you brought the rest of you into it. Your music, everything that you like, brings into that work. Brilliant.
And they went from being sort of, it sounds bad if I say this, but slightly chocolate boxy, kind of very traditional pictures of birds.
Mm-hmm.
So, some of them are really quite dark, the new pictures. There's a lot of black ink gets sloshed around now. And I genuinely thought that this was something that there's going to be a tiny group of people that you might be able to find on an obscure website that might enjoy them. But and all manner of different people have bought them. It's not, there's not a string of goths outside my house or something like that.
Well, there was one, I don't know where I found this. I think it's on your shop, isn't it? This statement summed it up for me. You've got some of your items on there for sale, and you've been talking about Christmas, I think. A great gift for the goth who has everything. I just thought that totally summed it up, because there are all sorts of groups of people out there in this world who like all sorts of different things. And we think, oh, it's a real small niche. It's not. All small niches are still actually massive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just love that. So anybody who's thinking about, oh, well, I'm making these because people buy them and like them, but underneath you've got this like desire bubbling away to do something different, then, we've had several guests who've gone down this journey. And Ruth, I think, is just really sums it up. You've gone from doing birds, which were lovely and people love and still do, because obviously now you've got a commission for one, which is quite amusing, isn't it, really?
We're feeling a bit rusty at the beginning. Oh, I remember this.
But there you are. It's the whole you're being you, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Really doing your thing and being you. And fabulous. I really love that story. So obviously, as you've gone through that change of embroidering beautiful birds to now your kind of industrial decay, urban decay, the kind of darker side of things, techniques have had to evolve as well. So you've said there about, you've been experimenting with things. So do you want to tell us a bit more about this issue of photographs and the experimentation you've been on there? Because that obviously sounds quite exciting as well.
I like using Photoshop particularly. I'm not very good at it, but I like the way that it looks when it's done properly.
Yeah, it's really hard, I find.
It is. And I'd love to be able to add in sort of quite ghostly images, I suppose, which hopefully the acetone transfer would do.
Right.
There were stories of, after the tsunami in Japan, people feeling that there was a sort of presence with them, almost like they called them the ghosts of the tsunami.
Right.
That people who didn't realise that they had died in the disaster.
Right. Yeah.
And were still trying to carry on their real life. So they'd still say, for example, there were stories from a taxi driver who said that somebody got into the back of his taxi and he drove them to wherever it was going. And he, there was nobody there when he got there, kind of thing.
I have to say, this sending shivers up my spine. It's really weird. Go on. Yeah, I'm fascinated.
I'd love to do something, for like... based on that, so having the acetone transfers as sort of like little ghostly images in the background of the piece of work. So it's that's somewhere I'd like to go with these sort of bit of Photoshop and photographs transferred into a design. Right,
and so it's the transferring that's also a challenge onto the fabric. So it's not like, stuff I've done, I've printed a photograph, you get them sheets, don't you, or whatever, you just kind of whack it through your printer and cross your fingers and something vaguely usable comes out the other side. But now obviously you don't want to do that because you've already layered up your background, is that?
Yes, because my backgrounds are now, basically I patch pieces of fabric together and just running strips around them. Then I chop them all up into pieces, put them in the washing machine to make them all fray at the edges.
Yeah.
And then I, what I call Frankenstein stitch them all back together again. So just big sort of, like big stab stitches, but they're all wonky, they're not all neat.
Yeah.
And so that kind of texture, then putting it through the printer, I think my husband might be a little bit cross if I try and pour that in the printer.
He'll be banned. You'll have to have your own printer, won't you? People have their own iron, don't they, for textile art, or several irons. Yeah,
definitely. Yes, exactly that. So I think it would make very funny noises if I tried to put a piece of my work down into the printer. Yeah, so definitely. I need to find a way that I can print onto that, but without feeding it through a printer.
Right. Basically. Okay. And so that's what you're thinking this acetone process might do for you.
In theory, yes.
Right. So you haven't tried it yet. It's just an in-theory idea.
I've got a bottle of acetone in front of me somewhere. I've lost it again now, but it's, to play with.
Playing with acetone. Right. Sounds great. Right. Okay. So I love that sense of experimentation as well. That's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that. Meanwhile, don't spill it on your bird.
No, it doesn't get anywhere near those. Or the kittens that I'm currently sharing a room with.
Kitten, right. Oh, dear me. Yes, you do have an army then, don't you?
We got 3 foster kittens at the moment, so they're adding to the numbers of paws in the house.
So you've got a lot then, have you?
Yeah, they're 8 at the moment. 3 of which aren't ours, so I can't claim all of them.
Oh, dearie me. Right. I do admit I'm not a cat lover. So anyway, enjoy your cats and your kittens. With all that excitement, and you're hoping that maybe you might have an exhibition. And have you got a body of work already assembled for that then, Ruth?
Some of it's ready, yes. Yeah. It's going to be in Mumbles, in a little gallery called Tides. And it's going to be lockdown based, but I've got a few pieces of work based on a theatre in Swansea called the Palace Theatre,
right?
Which is a lovely, lovely building, but it's just bits have been slowly dropping off it and things growing out of it, and it's not very well looked after.
Right.
But all of a sudden it's been bought and it's being smartened up and turned into, I think, some kind of office building, I think, but they're going to kind of keep the style of it. They're going to keep the stage from the inside of the theatre and that kind of thing.
Yeah, lovely. So really, you'll have to crack on and get your any photos you wanted before it gets too tidy, then, won't you? Have you already got?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. But I mean, it might be nice to do one when it's all finished as well and have just the contrast. But
and so then that was another question I was thinking about, because some of the pieces that you've sent me look, well, not look like they're obviously from inside ruined, falling down buildings. So I was just kind of wondering, do you get your hard hat out or sneak in, or maybe I shouldn't even ask you that. Where'd you find all these old buildings?
Swansea has got quite a lot of places that are bits of dropping off them.
Oh, right. Yes. Probably a bit like Hull then.
So, but sometimes they're pictures that I adapt from the internet and add in other, elements to them.
Right.
But yes, some of them are Swansea based, and they tend to be the more of the outside, because obviously it's a bit naughty to go inside.
Yes, not the best idea, really. Either. You don't know what's in there either, do you? Let's face it. Right, no. So that was just something else that I was quite intrigued about. We're hoping, and do you think the exhibition will go ahead? What are your thoughts?
Well, I've been promised that the exhibition will go back if the
right.
So in theory, yes, but it might not be March. So
right. Okay, then.
April, May next year. Who knows?
Right. Okay. Yeah. But at least it's not going to go away. You'll still be able to do that. Right. Oh, that's
definitely,
something to look forward to and keep our fingers crossed. Anyway, definitely.
Definitely, yes. No, it's a lovely place. I've done a little exhibition there before, and she's very lovely. So I'm looking forward to that.
Brilliant. Right. So you've been experimenting with embroidery for a long time, and is there any specific? You said there you got started off with a cross-stitch snowflake, like I think many of us do, start off with a little kit or a little snowflake or a little cross-stitchy thing. So is there any kind of particular moment in time where you thought, yeah, I want to really do this? You said almost from leaving university. So what was the kind of journey in a nutshell for you, Ruth, then?
Okay, dokes. Well, the cross-stitch snowflake, and then because I was only little, I was about 5 or 6, I think. My mum and dad used to buy little cross-stitch kits for Christmas and birthdays because they were expensive.
Yeah, there was a treat, weren't there? Yeah,
definitely. And then I started just taking stencils because I've got no art background at all.
Right.
So I'd take stencils and just colour them in with stitching. And then I'd give them to people. And I gave them to James, who's now my husband, when I was in school.
Aww.
And his father's a sculptor. So his mum said to me, why don't you think about doing this as a job? And I mean, that's not, no, you're going to only do that as an artist. If
I'm not an artist, yeah.
Exactly, yes. So started from there. And then when I left university, I thought, well, maybe it's just something what a lady said to me, if you don't try, you'll never know.
Yeah, true.
And I thought, well, there we go. Let's give it a go, see what happens. And so I moved to Ireland and became an artist. So when you look back at it, it's quite a scary thought. But at the time, you're just like, oh, well, yeah, off we go.
Randomly moved to Ireland. I randomly moved to Ireland as well.
Did you?
Yeah, not to be an artist, though. I'd packed my job in. But anyway, my son was actually born in Ireland. Yeah, so quite amusing. Anyway, so did you do art at university?
Nope. I did chemistry and then left. I didn't finish my degree. But I did a year of a City and Guilds in embroidery at Swansea College.
Yeah.
But that's the only sort of training I've had, as it were. There's no art, no nothing other than this year of City and Guilds.
Right. So you randomly went to Ireland and said, right, that's it, I'm an artist now. And then you've carried on being an artist ever since. So
exactly.
Hats off to you. I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? Lots of guests have said, oh, yeah, I can't even call myself an artist. I just don't feel as if I've got the confidence to call myself an artist. So, you were well out there. Let's move to a different country and I'm going to call myself an artist.
Yeah, no, I still don't like it as a title, but I don't know. I tend to call myself an embroiderer, but there's sometimes not so much embroidery in the new places. I mean, there still is quite a lot, but I don't know why. But then people don't always know what that is. So
well, no, and it can often bring in different preconceived and wrong impressions as well, of course. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely more what you would call textile art. It's art made out of textiles rather than pure surface embroidery kind of thing. But yeah, It's always hard, isn't it? What the hell do we call ourselves?
Yeah, I just try and avoid the label if I can and just be a me.
There we are then. You're you.
I'm a me.
That was something that comes through, I think, Ruth, very strongly in your work, your journey. It's like I'm going to be me. And that should be the easiest thing in the world. And quite often I think it can be the most difficult thing in the world for people.
Definitely, I find it very hard. I'm quite pleased that you said that, because I feel very, I suppose, sort of lost in it for quite a lot. I suppose you don't kind of feel that you've got this sort of strong path of confidence, and you know exactly what you're doing. So that means a lot that it comes out like that.
No, it really, really does. So as you then evolved through the birds phase, and then obviously into the work that you kind of wrapped up in now, and which brings together all aspects of you. I mean, you've talked about some of the inspirations. How do you think that's evolved into your art?
With the birds, I always kept what I liked and what I was doing very separate.
Right. Yes.
So, like I say, it's not like I've got anything against birds. I'm not a hater of birds or anything like that, but they just don't particularly speak to my soul, as it were.
Yeah.
And I suppose you kind of need something that speaks to your sort of insides rather than what you just make a pretty picture kind of thing. So I suppose in some ways, I've learned more styles of art that I like, because I feel terrible when I say this, but if I was to go into an art gallery, I can appreciate that it's very clever, but I wouldn't necessarily want any of it on my wall.
Right. And I think we can all feel that about all sorts of things, can't we? We can look at it and think, yeah, that's beautifully done. It's beautiful, but I don't want to buy it. So it's tapping into the opposite of that, isn't it?
And I think when you can start to see things like some of the Photoshop work that's out there and things, and you sort of realise that, you're not a complete sort of idiot. It's just that what I like is a bit different to perhaps what's traditionally in a museum or an art gallery kind of thing. And I suppose I felt I found it quite difficult to find inspiration from somewhere like that, because I didn't sort of connect with anything. Yes. But I suppose over the years I found more things that I like, and so I found inspiration sort of since then, I suppose.
Right. Yeah. So it's back to a lot of it, the kind of wonders of the internet, isn't it? We can find these things now, and I don't suppose it doesn't matter whether we're trying to find out about Tudor embroidery or industrial decay art or the things that people are doing with Photoshop and all the rest of it. It's trying to find it, isn't it? So that you can find your, tribe, as they all talk about. It's all part of it, isn't it? You need to find out where you kind of belong, and then express that in terms of your art. Yes,
exactly. And you kind of think, I like what he's doing with that, so I can add bits of that into what I'm doing, and then take it off in a slightly different direction again. So,
there's some really good. You do see some. I mean, I don't really go looking for it, so it's just like whatever passes by me in some respects. But you do see some fabulous, obviously photoshopped photos. You think, wow, but that's so good. And I'm sure there's a lot of people don't understand that isn't real, because there was always that thing of the camera never lies, but now the camera does lie. It lies all the time. And I think that's really quite a fundamental shift in imagery.
Definitely. And I mean, the fact in films they can put people into films that aren't even alive anymore, that
there's like nothing real about a film anymore, is there? It's not a film.
And you can be watching it going, this is good, and then you think, hang on a minute, that can't be right. That person can't be in this film.
Well, that kind of brings it back to the stories about the Japanese tsunami and the people getting in taxis that aren't there anymore and things. So, maybe the camera isn't lying in that respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So in terms of techniques, is there anything, I mean, you're explaining there about how you build up your backgrounds and your Frankenstein stitches, but you're experimenting with the photo kind of side of things. Is there anything that's your kind of go-to? This is what I like to do as the basis of my work. I find it fascinating to be able to make things look old and scruffy and worn out, I think that is almost more of a challenge than making something look perfect and beautiful.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of knots in things, so a lot of French knots, bullion knots, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
To try and sort of beads and sort of scrunchy textural things like luchador and things like that, and even pieces of paper, handmade paper and all kinds of things. What else do I like? I like watching all the dye spread out at the beginning, and you kind of think, I kind of like to think of it as sort of working with nature to create it. It's not like I've done it. It's like a sort of a combination. You kind of think, I'll put some of this here and a bit of that there, and then when I spray it with water, then this happens, and you come back to it a couple of days when it's dry, and it doesn't look anything like you intended it to necessarily. But
it's like a real nice surprise. Oh, look what it's done.
Exactly.
Or is it, oh, look what it's done?
It depends. There's a lot of windows have had to be lightened because the dye spreads into the window. And like, oh, bother.
Right, because it was interesting you saying about using the knots and beads and things, because a couple of the pieces that you've sent me that I'll put on, and I forgot to say, of course, all your stuff's on your episode of Stitchery Stories, but the images that you've sent me were looking like the inside of somewhere, and steps and old places are covered in broken glass and stuff. You don't know where it's all come from, but the floors are littered with stuff like that, and I think you've created that effect really, really well.
Oh, thank you. That's I suppose what helps is it's, as you say, you don't know where it's all come from, bits of roof and bits of thing that have come through the broken windows or whatever it might be, but there's always sort of little bits of, I don't know quite how you describe it, but rubble, I suppose, for want of a better word, bits of things. And so
yes,
trying to add those in and making it look less like a perfect building, it's and I think that's where the dye helps, because the dye is all patchy and things. It's not like a kind of perfect. I'm not after perfection, put it like that. I've done that for long enough with the bird.
It's right. So that's how you start to build up those layers of decay and whatever, just by letting things run like they do in a decaying building anyway. Water comes in and runs where it wants to go, and things rust, and the wind makes things look weathered and stuff. Right. Yeah. That's really interesting, that. And as you've gone through those processes, I suppose, I can see now where you say there's been a lot of a learning curve as well.
Definitely. Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of things that have gone in the bin.
Oh dear. So you haven't chopped them up and made them appear somewhere else then? Can you do that with your...
Well, I went through a bit of a phase. When we lived on the boat, we had an open fire. So if I didn't like it, it would go on the fire. Right. So it kept us nice and warm for quite a while, all the various disasters.
So I was going to ask you that, because you said about breach perfects on your canal boat. And are you still living in a canal boat? Because obviously now where you're talking to me, you're not on a canal boat. I know you're not. You're in a house.
No, not anymore. No, it was a year-long experiment of which was lovely, and I wouldn't take back, but it was a little bit lonely.
Right.
Because you have to move every 2 weeks unless you pay for a mooring, and so you basically you were always the sort of new person somewhere. So even if you wanted to join a group or meet some people, you'd only meet them for a couple of weeks, and then you'd have to go again.
Right. Yeah, and then of course people have like permanent moorings, and I think, well, why are you living on a boat? That's not going anywhere. But anyway, that's beside the point, I suppose. Right, anyway, there was another aside. That was something else I was going to ask you about, and then I forgot, so I just remembered. So I'm glad you mentioned about the boat. Right, so then, Ruth, what would you say as you've gone on your creative journey? What's the highlights so far, do you think, of what you've achieved or what you've created? What in your terms, what is your highlight?
I think for me, it's actually starting to be able to make things that I like. I found it quite difficult for so long making things I would never put on my wall.
Right.
I appreciate what's gone into them and things like that. I'm not being mean about my birdies, but
no, because they're beautiful. They are beautiful, and I can see why people bought them and stuff. But I can also see that as you say, it didn't speak to your soul, did it? So yeah.
And so I think probably the biggest thing is actually starting to make things for me. And despite people telling you that you must make bright pictures and that are this and that look like this and are of lovely flowers and of pink fluffy things, and when you're busy splashing black dye all over everything, thinking that's puts me in my happy place.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's because there is always a group of people who want things that they want, and it's tapping into it. And you know what? I think that's the hardest thing about being in business. It doesn't matter whether it's art business or anything. It's finding that group of people who want what you can give to the world. And it's the hardest thing. So I can see why that is your high point. And again, I hope that kind of gives people confidence if they're in a similar situation, that they're not the only person in the whole wide world who's started off making one set of things and have then decided that actually they don't want to do that anymore and be themselves. So brilliant. I love that high point. Thank you for sharing that with us as well, because I think it's quite a personal, it's not about, oh well, I was in this gallery, or I was given this prize or whatever. It's a very personal highlight, which I think makes it all the more powerful. So thank you, Ruth, for sharing that with us all.
That's okay. I can get more things, like galleries and things, but that's just the honest one, I suppose.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And so then, of course, I'm sure you've got some stories for us since you're throwing black dye around everywhere. Have you any stories when things possibly didn't go very well, and maybe you could call it a disaster, but importantly, have you got anything, A, just to give us all a bit of a laugh, and B, what did you learn from that experience?
The big one that springs to mind is I went briefly into a dragon phase.
Right.
In the middle of all the birds, I had a brief dragon phase, and I decided that I used to show them to James, my other half, and he'd sort of say, oh, maybe a bit of this or maybe a bit of that. Well, this is why this doesn't, isn't looking right. Maybe put this here. And I decided one day to just not take his advice. I thought, no, he's talking nonsense. I know exactly what I'm doing. And this dragon was all fabric painted and quilted and all kinds of like scales all put in him and everything. And I stood back and looked at him one day and I thought, that's a Mr. Man worm. It's not a dragon at all.
A Mr. Man worm.
Yeah, just a big red worm. Oh. So that's the big one. So I suppose what I learned from that is to suck it up and take advice.
And is he an artist?
Sort of, yes. He's
right.
He's mostly he's written a book which is all illustrated. So it's so a bit of both. But he does a lot of art and
right.
He's always done it. So he knows how things should be and how not to make a Mr. Man worm.
That's what I was getting at, because quite often our dear halves and friends, etc., if you ask them, you're getting just some utterly random opinion that really, in some respects, doesn't matter because they're not the person who the art's being made for anyway. And yes. Secondly, half the time they're either being kind because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or it's just like they don't understand what the hell you're doing. So, I mean, for me, the thing I always just say to people is, for goodness sake, do not say, but what's it supposed to be? It's like the worst thing. What have you been doing? I've been doing this. But what's it supposed to be? Well, it is what it is, So I just, sometimes I'll show my friends I'm doing this. Oh, that's great, I don't think anyone dare now say what's it supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of the embroideries, things just don't go to plan from the beginning. So, the dye will have gone in the wrong place, or you put something in and it doesn't quite work. And so it's sort of, in some ways, you're covering up the little mistakes until you're kind of making it look right. I mean, that sounds like I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, but there's a lot of trial and error in things. And you think, oh, right, okay, well, I'll try that. And, oh, yeah, that works now. So, yes, that's fine. But it's...
There is a lot of trial and error, though, when you're doing what you're trying to do, which is to emulate distressed metal and broken glass and things out of, a piece of old quilt cover or whatever it is that you're using, and using things like dyes and other materials that will run and depending on what the fabric's like, can show things or not. So it is a process of experimentation, I think, to get to the look that you achieve, definitely. So
yeah. So I think, in some ways nothing goes to plan.
And what about, therefore, unfinished objects? Have you got any UFOs lurking around anywhere, or is it something that, oh no, you burnt them, didn't you?
Well, not all of them. Yeah, I burnt all of them from that era. Yeah. I have two, which, because of the question, I had a look at, and I decided that I would bin them because I'm not going to finish them. But I like the idea of printing a Photoshop image that I've made onto fabric and then embellishing it with stitch.
Yeah.
But I haven't mastered that as a technique yet. So it needs, I think it needs a lot more of a sort of what I'd call a knobbly fabric in the background that I print onto, rather than this very smooth, and then you've got the knobbly stitching. So it kind of just doesn't quite work.
I know exactly what you mean. It's back to that limitations of printing, I think, isn't it? In some respects, that, we tend to get a nice piece of calico or, polycotton or whatever it happens to be. And yet what we really want is something more knobbly and distressed to start off with, and we can't print on that, which goes back to your experiment with the acetone then, doesn't it? And that side
exactly.
Of yeah. So those two UFOs, are they a result of experiments that didn't quite work, and then you just think, no, this is just not, it's not ever going to be anything?
Yes, and I think because there was so much work in them, because I put an awful lot of hand stitching into this whole place, there's a part of you that doesn't want to just bin it. But it's been long enough now. I think I can just, I think I can part with it now.
You could have a little ceremony and say goodbye to them, couldn't you?
Exactly. Pop it on the fire again in the.
Goodbye. Oh dear. So, well, there we are. What the other just last thing I was going to ask about is, obviously at the moment it's really difficult to kind of plan ahead, and you're looking towards hopefully getting your exhibition at the was it the Tides Gallery. Is there anything else that you're like working towards that you kind of like to share with us at the moment, or just anything that comes under the future plans, projects, and kind of what you've got up your sleeve?
What I'd like to do for a little while is just a bit more experimentation. I've had a few commissions recently, and that's made things a little bit easier financially. So I can now sort of explore things. It doesn't have to work first time and be up for sale in a week's time. Otherwise, you don't get to eat that week.
Yeah, you've bought yourself some time with those. Exactly. That's nice. Yeah, so, good.
I'm looking forward to doing things, with the photo transfers, and just, my sister's been playing a lot with Bondweb recently and things, and it's like, oh yeah, I've forgotten about Bondweb. I may have to go have a go at that, and that sort of thing. Yeah,
there's lots of interesting things you can do as well. And there's somebody popped up the other day. They'd been playing around with Tyvek as well, because you can heat that and colour it and distress it and things like that. So there's lots of things that we can. We think, oh yeah, I'll do that, and then you forget about it. I've probably got a box full of things like that where I'm going to do that and mess around with that, and then I don't until I have a conversation with somebody. I think, oh yes, I'll go and do that again. So
it might also be nice to sort of start creating a few things to sort of find a bit more of me again. That take it maybe a little step further towards maybe the metal, or the bands, or the forensics. Not that you can have a big corpse in the middle of your embroidery or whatever, but something that's really sort of properly me, even more me than the buildings, which I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but
no, it absolutely does. I think it's all part of that evolution, isn't it, really, of like what can I produce, what do I want to produce, and what am I now? It's a journey, and what am I going to do next? So so you've got a period of having a bit of a creative play coming along as well. So I think that's definitely something to be looking forward to, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right. Well, we'll all be keeping an eye out, therefore, to see what you come up with. So everybody, as ever, you can find Ruth. She's on Facebook, she's on Instagram, and links and examples of her work will all be on her episode of Stitchery Stories as well. And a website, of course. And so if you know the goth who has everything, point them in Ruth's direction, because I thought that was just a fabulous, fabulous comment. And if you don't have a little phrase like that describes your art, then I really do recommend doing it. It's like the artist version of that dreadful elevator pitch that everybody talks about at networking meetings. Oh dear. Right, complete aside there. Right, brilliant. Ruth, it's been fabulous speaking to you. I'm really, really intrigued with what you've been doing. And again, hats off to you for having that courage to say, no, I ain't doing that anymore. I'm doing this instead. It's just brilliant. And look what it's brought you. I think that's really, really a great thing. So there we are. Thank you so much, Ruth.
And thank you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.